Today we're checking out a completely battery-powered and wireless PA system. And yes, that means that the speakers and the subwoofer are both completely wireless and battery-powered. You'll notice there are no dongles or adapters needed for the subwoofers or the speakers because they have the wireless receivers built into them. This all works because of a wireless technology known as Skaa with 2 A's. And with Skaa, you can connect up to 4 wireless receivers with 1 Skaa transmitter in normal mode, and you can connect 2 receivers with 1 transmitter in Skaa Pro mode. Pretty wild. I almost didn't believe it when I first heard about this system. And we're going to be checking out the Death from Below subwoofer by Dillinger Labs and the Soundboks 4 by Soundboks. Both of those systems have Skaa receivers built into them. This is the transmitters, and you can send this 1 transmitter to 2 or 4 receivers, depending on how you use it. But they also have this. This is the Streetheart Receiver, and this can be used to connect to any speaker or system that doesn't have a Skaa receiver built into it. And with Skaa, it automatically pairs to each other. You don't have to connect to it like you do with Bluetooth, and you don't have to search for a frequency like you do with normal wireless. It's pretty wild, and I do want to be clear right off the bat, this is not Bluetooth. This is Skaa Wireless. It's something completely different, and that's something I'm going to go over later in the video. Everything's going to have its limitations, of course. You're going to have to be aware of the latency of normal mode versus pro mode and stuff like that, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. But pretty insane that you can do something like this. Especially for DJs, I actually think that this is a great setup, and I actually use this for 3 different shows as a DJ and 4 different shows with my band, and I'm going to go over my experience with using these. And then you can see if this is something that's right for you and your needs. I do want to say many thanks to Dillinger Labs and Skaa and Soundboks for sending this gear over for me to check out for the video. This is not a paid video or anything like that, and all the opinions in this video are my own. Personally, I am going to be using this system as my main set whenever I do a DJ set from now on. It's just been so convenient to have no cables, fast setup time, wireless built into it. It's been really fantastic. So don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and let's go ahead and get started. So this right here is the Dani Transmitter, and this is what's going to transmit the signal wirelessly to the other units. So you can send this either to the Streetheart Receiver, or it can also connect to the Death from Below subwoofer or the Soundboks. Remember, this 1 transmitter can connect to 4 different receivers at once, which is pretty wild. It comes with the smaller antenna, but you can get the larger antenna upgrade if you would like. I'm going to put that one on here, and then I'm going to power it up. You can see your battery life when you power it up, and if you ever need to see it while you're using it, just tap the power button once and it'll show you your battery life. You have your volume knob right here. I do wish it had some sort of like indicator showing you where it's at, but for the most part, I actually just leave this almost maxed out. And what's really cool about this is that it charges via USB-C. And you get up to 12 hours of battery life with this thing fully charged. So you don't have to worry about it dying at your shows. So here on the back, you have a couple of different connections. So you have 2 different inputs, and they are 1/4-inch inputs, and you have 2 different through ports if you want to pass that signal to somewhere else. You do have this switch to set it to either -10 or +4. Always use your ears, but in general, if you're using TS cables, set it to -10. If you're using TRS cables, set it to +4. Again, always use your ears, and you do also have a pad on both inputs to either be off at -6 or at -12. So you're going to connect to this with whatever you want to send to your speakers. This can be from a mixer, from an audio interface, an iPad or a computer out, your DJ controller, whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to do just an iPad to keep it simple. You can plug in 1 if you want, or you can plug in 2, which I'm going to do since I have this stereo cable right here. And remember to set your level accordingly and use a pad if you need it. And then you can set your level here on the back. And again, for the most part, I usually just have this all the way up. You can triple tap it to mute the audio and triple tap it again to unmute it. And one final control, if you triple tap the power button, you'll see that it cycles between red and green. So green is Skaa normal mode, and then red is pro mode. Normal will connect to 4 receivers at once, and then pro can connect to 2 receivers at once and will have lower latency. And I'm going to go over a little bit more of that here in a minute. I'm just going to focus on the setup right now. So now your transmitter is all set up. So let's go over some of the options for the receivers. So this is the Streetheart Receiver, and this is what you use to connect to any speaker or sound source that does not have Skaa built into it. They give you this R right here to let you know that this is a receiver, and then the Dani has a T on it for the transmitter. Controls are very, very similar. Choose your antenna that you want. It charges with USB-C. You can power it on. You can tap the button to see your battery life, and you have a volume knob right here. This is also the bond button, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. So here on the other side, you have 4 separate outputs that you can use. The bottom 2 are your main outputs, and that's the main ones that I'm going to be using to connect to the speaker. You can use TS or TRS cables with it, but they do recommend TRS cables. And do note that the upper 2 outputs do not work with TS cables. Keep in mind, you might need some XLR to 1/4-inch adapters, which I will link to down below just in case if you need them. On those other outputs, you have a 6 or 12 pad on this upper left one, and you can also set it up for going into headphones if you push the headphone button. Now the split, so if it's up, that means both headphones will hear what's coming out of 1 and 2, and then split means 1 will hear 1 and 2 will hear 2. So set it up properly for what you need and how you plan to use it. All right, let's get them connected. So you'll see this bond light be kind of dim when it's not paired, and then when I turn on the Dani Transmitter, you'll see that it lights up, meaning that it has paired. If for some reason it doesn't, double tap the bond button, and then it will explore for a new SKAA transmitter. And now they're connected. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in from my iPad to the Dani Transmitter. Then I'm going to plug in the Streetheart Receiver into this little speaker right here. Obviously, you're going to do this on a bigger scale with a bigger speaker. This is just for the YouTube demo. And when I start playing music, you can hear that it is working. You do also get a signal indicator right here, so just make sure you're not clipping or sending too hot of a signal. And also you can adjust via the pad and the level settings. Now, one of the things that you are going to want to do after you have paired from the transmitter to the receiver, you want to save to the green list. What that basically is like a favorites list. So it remembers that these 2 systems always want to be paired together. So you do that by holding the bond button while it's paired, and you'll see that the light turns green. Hopefully my camera picked that up. I'm going to dim the lights so that you can see that the light is in fact green and not orange. That means it is now saved to like a favorites list to always connect to this Dani Transmitter. Pretty cool. So that's the Streetheart. Now let's connect to the subwoofer and the Soundboks speaker, which have SKAA Wireless built into them. So here's the Death from Below subwoofer, which FYI is just the greatest name for a subwoofer pretty much ever, but should be pretty straightforward at this point. Push a button to power it up. You can see that it automatically bonded with the Dani Transmitter because there is a built-in wireless receiver here. You don't even need the Streetheart or anything like that. If for some reason it didn't, double tap the bond button and it will explore for another transmitter. You can tap the power button once to see your battery life, and you can hold the bond button in order to save it to a green list. This is pretty universal among all of the SKAA systems. And also the bond button is also your volume level. There are a couple of extra controls in here though. So if you tap the power button twice, you get to EQ mode. I'll post them on the screen so you can set them correctly for what is right for you. I personally am using them with the Soundboks 4 speakers. So in that case, I'm going to set it to the 3rd light. You can tap it 4 times to set it to mono or stereo. So the 4th light means it's left, 3rd is the right, and then 2 is mono. For subwoofers, I think most of you, including myself, are going to want it to be in mono. So I'm going to set it to the 2nd light. If you tap it 5 times, this is for the time alignment. I'll post those on the screen as well. Just always use your ears with something like this. And then something I did forget to mention in the Streetheart is that if you tap 6 times on the bond button, that will reset everything. So it'll reset everything kind of back to normal. It won't have a green list saved or anything like that. So that can be pretty helpful. And the battery is built in, so you just plug it in with the provided power cable to charge it when you're done. Or you can also just leave it plugged in. And you can get up to 40 hours of battery life with this thing. Of course, that depends on how loud you use it, but that's pretty crazy. And I use this at shows without any problems with the battery life, and it was cranked pretty loud. One thing to note is there is no physical input. It basically only works with SKAA, which is an interesting choice, but just keep that in mind. And here's the Soundboks speaker, and you can see that it mounts with a pole on top of the subwoofer, which is great, keeps it nice and clean. On this side, you have the battery. And on the other side, you have the power and volume levels and a couple of other settings. So let's start with that first. So go ahead and power it on. And you're going to set it to join mode to use it with SKAA. Solo just means you can connect to it like a usual Bluetooth speaker. Host mode is cool. You can connect to one speaker with Bluetooth or wired, and then connect to 4 other Soundboks speakers wirelessly with SKAA. I'll link to a video about that if you want to check it out more. It's a pretty cool mode, but it's not what I'm really using for this video, but really cool. And you have this nice big wheel for setting the volume. Now here on the back of the speaker down at the bottom, this is where you have your bond button. You can see the logo right here, but you also have two XLR 1/4-inch combo jack inputs, as well as a 3.5 millimeter in and out. So it's very nice that it includes physical connections into this one. You should understand how the bond button works. I'm going to dim the screen just so you can see. As soon as I turn on my Dani transmitter, you'll see that it's a nice bright amber. If for some reason it doesn't find it, double tap it to explore, and when it has paired, hold it and it saves it to the green list. And then this is the battery that comes with it. You can push this button in order to see your battery life. I'm going to unplug it from the speaker. And then this part comes out so you can swap the batteries if you need extra battery life. But again, the battery life on these is incredible. And this is the battery, and it charges via USB-C. Always a big fan of anything that charges via USB-C. So you also do have an app that you can use to control Soundboks as well. So I'm going to connect to both of my speakers. And then I can start controlling the speaker. So I can adjust the volume of each of the speakers. And if I push these three dots, I can also set it to either solo, host, or join mode, all from the app itself. So I'm going to set them both to join mode. You also could set it so that you need a PIN code in order to connect to it with Bluetooth, which is pretty cool. And the app is also used to update the firmware. You can click this custom menu right here, and this will get you to the stereo roll. So if you want to use it in dual mono, or if you want to set one to the left, and then I'm going to set this other one here to the right so that you could use it in stereo. You also can change your EQ. It has a couple of different settings down here: lounge, dance floor, and stage. I personally just have it on custom myself, and I have it kind of flat. That's what I think actually sounds the best. And then this Pro panel right here, you get control over the individual inputs if you do decide to use this with physical inputs. On channel 1 and channel 2, you can set your input gain, the gain, and the EQ as well. Very nice that you get to control all of this from the app itself, and you can even turn off the speaker from the app as well. Okay, as far as the specs and the price, here's the specs for the Dani transmitter. Some of the important ones: 14 hours of runtime on a full charge, which is great. The battery life on these are all fantastic. It says you have up to 50 meters of range indoors with the included smaller antenna. Make sure you always have clear line of sight with this wireless though. If you're interested in anything else, go ahead and pause the screen now. And the Dani transmitter is currently listed at $250. For the Streetheart Receiver, very similar, up to 12 hours of battery life from it being fully charged, 50 meters of range. And what's also nice is that the battery is user replaceable so that it doesn't just become a brick in the future. And I'm glad that they say that. Again, if you're interested in any of the other specs, go ahead and pause the screen now. And the Streetheart is also currently listed at $250. As far as the Death from Below subwoofer, it also says 50 meters of range. I like that they put this. Actual range will depend on the antenna placement on the transmitter side. So always make sure you have good line of sight from your transmitter to your receivers. As far as the speaker itself, it's two 8-inch speakers, and the frequency response is from 25 to 180 hertz. Acoustic max level is 122 decibels. I've done enough speaker reviews to know that there are going to be people who show up in the comments saying, I have to know watts, I have to know RMS, I have to know peak, I have to know continuous, I have to know SPL. This is what we have. I'll have more links down below if you want to find out more details about it. Pause the screen if you want to know more. The battery life is up to 40 hours at a regular listening volume. Again, if there's anything else that you're interested in, go ahead and pause the screen now. As of the time of shooting, the price of the Death from Below subwoofer is currently $900. I will have links to all of these down below. As far as the Soundboks 4, frequency response is from 40 hertz up to 20 kilohertz, 126 dB max volume. Battery life is 40 hours at mid volume, and 6 hours if you're at full volume all the way full. Pretty crazy. And the Soundboks 4 speaker is currently listed at $1,000, and I will link to this one down below as well. This one is available on Sweetwater too, but I'll have different places where you can purchase it down below in the description. They also do have different adapters that you can use with like audio interfaces or tablets and phones and stuff like that. So for example, they have the Cassandra, which is a USB transmitter. So you could plug this into like your iPad or something like that and go to 4 different Skaa receivers with this one transmitter. It does not have Skaa Pro mode, but that is pretty cool. You could run something like the app DJ, a Cassandra transmitter, and then 2 tops and 2 subwoofers, and you're ready to go. Pretty cool, and I'll link to that down below as well. So now let's talk about the difference between Skaa Pro and Skaa normal mode. So in normal mode, one transmitter, this Dani transmitter, can connect up to 4 receivers in normal mode, and then it can connect to 2 receivers in Pro mode. So what is the difference between the two modes? The main reason is because of the latency. So regular mode has 36 milliseconds of fixed latency. So if you're just playing music from Spotify or something similar, that's going to be totally fine. You want to use this mode. Now Pro mode has 19 milliseconds of latency. So that's going to be more for DJs who have to do something time sensitive, or even for bands, depending on the situation. Now, I know that there are going to be some people who are going to show up and they're going to lose their minds about the latency. I've seen people get upset about 3 milliseconds of latency on wireless gear, which FYI, you cannot hear 3 milliseconds of latency for sure. But I'm going to do a latency test, and here you go. So here's how it sounds with the direct connection from the iPad to the speaker. And then here's how it sounds when it's connected to Bluetooth. The iPad is connected to the speaker with Bluetooth. Unusable completely. Bluetooth has way too much latency. And I have a video going over that actually. And here's a latency test with Skaa. So I have my Ableton Push controller connected to the Dani Transmitter. It is set to Skaa Pro mode, which is 19 milliseconds of latency. And then the Streetheart is connected to this speaker right here. I'm going to play to a metronome and see how it sounds. I can even set it faster and try playing at a faster tempo. Completely fine. And even if I set it to normal Skaa mode with 36 milliseconds of latency, you can still do it. You can start to feel it here, but again, I can still do it and it's nowhere near as close to the latency of Bluetooth. I really do need to do a separate video on latency because there's a lot of people who will always ask about latency, and they ask that on like amp modelers and pedals and stuff like that, which I've never even heard of. Just doing a little bit of research, if you stand like 20 feet away from a speaker, you're already going to get about 18 milliseconds of latency. So we already deal with a certain level of latency. I'll have to do a whole nother video on that topic. I already know the comments are coming. I read pretty much every single comment that I get, and I just know that they're coming. But when I first heard that it was 19 milliseconds of latency, I was a little on the fence. And then I did some tests at home, and I was like, this really isn't that bad. And then I used it live, which brings me to talk about my experience of using it live. I will just say if you're super sensitive to latency, that's a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. I will just say that me using it live in these situations, which I'm going to share with you, I didn't have a problem with it. Make your decision accordingly. But I did use it 3 times as a DJ and 4 times with my band. Before I get to that, if you are finding this video helpful, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button. It truly does help out the channel a lot. And consider subscribing if you want to see more music gear, tech, and reviews like this in the future. So the first show that I brought this to was with my band. I brought 1 Dani Transmitter and then 2 of the Streetheart Receivers, which was already great that you have 1 transmitter to go to 2 different speakers. And this place that we play at a lot is called Scruffy Murphy's in Denver, Colorado. And one of the spots we have to put one of the speakers is on the other side of the door, so it's really nice to have wireless for this. But at this show, I set it up and I just told my band, hey, I'm trying a new wireless for the YouTube channel, and that was all I told them. I didn't want to tell them that there was latency with this, and I wanted to see if they noticed. We sound checked. I went out front and I listened to it to see if I could really hear a difference, and it sounded great. I asked my bandmates, I was like, hey, how does that wireless sound? Does it sound fine? And they all said, yeah. They went out and checked, and they were like, yeah, it sounds fine. And then I told them there was 19 milliseconds of latency. And they were almost like me, where I was like, really? There's no way there's 19 milliseconds of latency. Went back out again, and we're like, wow, we really can't tell with this. It sounds completely fine. And that was an important test, because if something sounds off, you don't have to be told what it is. You're gonna be able to hear, oh, something sounds off. We didn't hear anything that sounded off with that. Now, we do use in-ear monitors and direct guitar rigs at our shows, so I don't know if I would use this for like a wedge or something like that. But as far as having in-ears, it was completely fine. And then going out front and listening during soundcheck, I really didn't hear any issues with it. And you can be sure that the audience didn't hear it. Everyone still drank and sang along to Don't Stop Believing. The second show was for a wedding with the same band. This actually worked out really well because we had to play in like this weird kind of almost garage type of thing or something like that. But the speakers were outside and then we were inside. Man, you couldn't hear anything if you took out your in-ears. In there, all you could hear was drums. But out front where the audience was, that's where you could hear like with the speakers. Everything worked great. The only thing that happened is I left the receiver on top of the speaker and it vibrated and fell. And of course, the way that it landed was directly on the antenna and shattered the antenna. So make sure you gaff it down if you're going to attach it to a speaker like that. and always have a backup antenna, which I did. The third show, I was a wedding DJ for some friends of mine. On this one, I brought my EV50 speakers because I didn't have the Death from Below or the Soundboks yet. So it was one Dani Transmitter to 2 of the Streetheart receivers. Had absolutely no problems with it. I had to use this for the entire thing. Ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, all of that stuff, speeches, all of that was inside. Had no issues with this. It worked fantastic for that. So the fourth show was another wedding. I swear I've done so many weddings this year. But this one was my same 90s band that I play with. And at this one, I brought my speakers. I brought the EV50s to this one. My singer has a different setup that he uses. And this was the first time that I heard something a little bit weird with the latency in like 2 of the songs during our set. So with the EV50s, you go into those speakers and it's just you go into the subs and that goes to the tops. There's not 2 separate inputs for the tops and the subwoofer. With my singer, he has it separate where he has separate tops and separate subwoofers. So in particular, we did the song Baby Got Back, which has this staccato bass line. And with that, you could kind of hear it. We had in-ear monitors, so I could hear the song, but then I could feel the vibration of the subwoofer at that 19 milliseconds of latency. It wasn't like, oh God, this is a showstopper, we have to stop this song. It was just like, oh, I can kind of feel and hear a difference with that. I think it also happened during like one other song as well, but I can't remember which song it was. And my drummer noticed it too. But again, it wasn't a showstopper. It was just like, oh, you can feel and hear that difference with that latency. Again, I guarantee that the audience didn't notice that. Just me and my drummer noticed it. But still, I had one wireless transmitter that went to 2 separate speakers. The setup was so easy and so convenient. Everything has its trade-offs. The simplicity of this and the downside was 2 songs sounded a little weird. It's completely fine to me. That's my opinion. Make the decision that works best for you and your setup. All right, so all of those shows were with the Dani and the Streetheart. At the 5th show, I finally got to bring the Death from Below subwoofers and the Soundboks tops. For this one, it was for another wedding for some really good friends of mine. The setup for this was so fast and so convenient. I had some other friends there who were also wedding DJs, and they were just like, what is this setup? What is this? There's no cables. We used to run 100-foot cables for all this stuff. And they were like taking pictures of it so they could remember it, which was cool to see. Now, at this one, I did use this in Skaa regular mode. I had one Dani transmitter, and it went to 2 of the Death from Below subwoofers and 2 of the Soundboks tops. So I was going at 36 milliseconds of latency. I will say I am not a real DJ. I don't have like a deck and do all the beat mapping and stuff like that. I do want to get better at that in the future, actually, since I'm getting hired more and more to DJ. But I'm more of the wedding DJ who has great gear, can run sound and lights for the entire wedding and stuff like that. And I know how to make sure there's no dead time between the songs. But this worked so great all night. And it was a pretty large room too, and it filled the room really well. It was so nice to have no cables, nothing else having to attach to these speakers. Also at this one, I did use a battery-powered mixer as well. I'll link to that up above and down below if you want to check it out. So literally just the lights were the only thing I needed to find power for, which were behind me. Not having to find power was awesome. There was a part where they wanted to perform, so the husband and wife wanted to perform, they're musician friends of mine, and I was like, oh God, I can't do that with the 36 milliseconds of latency. So what I did is I just plugged both of them directly into the Soundboks speaker. That's why I'm really glad that Soundboks has those direct inputs for situations like that. There was one weird moment where I couldn't get them to pair to the tops. It paired fine to the Death from Below subwoofers, but I couldn't get them to pair to the tops. I got it to work. It wasn't really a big deal, but I reached out to them and they said, tried using the virtual off mode. So I'll link to a video that they have about it down below. But basically what you do is you tap the power button 6 times on the Dani transmitter. And what that'll do, it'll disable it from like going to sleep or powering off if it doesn't get audio. You do just have to make sure that you remember to do that at every show, every time that you turn this on, which I'm going to remember to do from now on. The only thing that was weird for this one was the speeches, because the speeches had to be really far away. And so they had already the latency of the speakers crossing the room and then adding 36 milliseconds of latency on top of that. I noticed, one of my musician friends noticed, so the next show I wanted to do it in Skaa Pro mode. But it was such an easy setup, such a clean setup. And then at the end of the night, I checked the battery on all of them, and that was after like 5 or 6 hours of them being on. I was sold on it at this point. So the 6th show, we used it with my band, and at this one, I wanted to bring the Soundboks just for my band, just to see how it kind of sounded. Now, they're not really meant for band speakers. We're a pretty loud rock pop. Well, we kind of specialize in doing everything. So we'll do like Metallica and then Spice Girls. I don't know if that's exactly what these are for, but I still wanted to use it. You know, I'm doing a YouTube video. So what I did is I brought it just as our center fill. So we wired into our main tops and then we used our center fill. I had our singer do a sound check. I asked him how it sounded. He said, I like him. And he's more picky about sound than I am. So most of the time with my band, I used like the Dani and the Streetheart combo. But with DJ setups, I'm definitely going to use the Death from Below and the Soundboks speakers. And the 7th show was a wedding I just did this weekend. And this one I was a wedding DJ and I used it in Skaa Pro mode this time. This time it was with the Death from Below subwoofers and the Soundboks speakers. This was definitely the winner for me. This is the setup that I'm going to continue to use. First of all, they had to be kind of set up in kind of a weird location. At first, when I showed up there, they said, oh yeah, we're going to set you up over here, kind of by the bar. And I was like, I'm going to block like 2/3 of the bar. The best way to piss people off is to block the alcohol or keep them from getting food. So I was like, can I move over here? And they kind of moved some tables. It was kind of a weird setup that I had to do, but it actually worked out because again, I don't have to run any cables to these. So I can set up one of the subwoofers and speakers over here and the other one kind of over here. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the video. It worked out great. It worked out really well. Speeches sounded so much better in pro mode. You could hear a tiny bit of delay, but again, no one else noticed it. Probably just me who notices that. Speeches are the only thing that are slightly weird about it, but then just, you know, being a DJ, it was so easy just to have this set up and it worked really well. I will also link to that DJ booth that I have down below in the description. It's a pretty cool one, pretty affordable as well, and really nice. But yeah, at this setup, I was like, I'm sold. This is for sure the new setup I'm going to do when I do DJ stuff. Most weddings are for, you know, around 100, 150 people anyways, so these speakers work great for that. Again, I checked the battery life at the end of the night and they were all fine. None of them were under 3 lights at the end of the night after using them for like 6 hours. Such a great setup. It's definitely a very loud system, especially for being all battery powered. I remember when I got the Death from Below speaker, I set it up and was trying to test it out. I didn't know that my wife was sleeping. And sure enough, this was the actual text thread that we got. I can confirm that I woke up my wife from a nap trying to test these out on the opposite side of the house. So I guess that's a good sign. Some people might want more low end. You know, these are 2 8-inch subwoofers. I think that low end is enough. If you want 18-inch subwoofers, get 18-inch subwoofers. I personally think that this gives enough low end, in my opinion, for the situations that I used it in. But again, get the right speaker that you want and the right speaker for the job. The main con that I have for this is that the subwoofers don't have a physical input. I would love to have some sort of safety, like if something goes wrong, I would still love to be able to plug in a hardwired cable if I needed to, if something went wrong. How many things go wrong at live shows? It's nice to always be prepared for something like that. I would really love if they had a model that had physical inputs on the subwoofer. But overall, it's just a really cool system. They sound great. It's not like, oh my God, this is the best speaker I've ever heard, but at the same time, they sound great. And that's the other thing is like, even if they sounded okay or something like that, the convenience of this is just so incredible. And I have a video going over like why I'm not obsessed with finding the most perfect tone. If something sounds good, gets the job done, and then makes my life easier, I'm much more interested in something like that. And I have a video going over that if you want to find out about my personal tone philosophy. But overall, you can't beat the simplicity of this. And I love it, and I'm going to continue to use it. And if you do decide that this system is right for you, there will be purchase links down below so you can get the right combination of gear that you need for your setup. Also, just FYI, the Skaa YouTube channel has a lot of really helpful info. I'll link to that up above and down below. You should definitely check it out. It's actually done by Josh, who also has a channel called Music Tech Help Guy. That dude has helped me out with so much stuff with Logic from that channel, so also a great channel to check out. Shout out to both the Skaa Sound YouTube page and Music Tech Help Guy. But I'll link to both of those down below in the description as well. Be sure to like this video if you found it helpful. It truly does help out support the channel. These videos take a while to put together. Hitting the like button does feed the YouTube algorithm gods, and I would appreciate it. 2 other videos I'm going to check out my video on my tone philosophy that I mentioned earlier. And if you also want to see my setup for ceremonies, definitely check out my video on that as well. So you can check out both of those videos by clicking the links on your screen now. Thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at ScottYuleMusic. I'm trying to get more followers over on Instagram as well. Again, many thanks to Skaa, Dillinger Labs, and Soundboks for sending this over for me to check out. If you guys have any other cool gear you want me to check out, please leave them as a comment down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.